Hi, it's Marie from Marie's Scrappy Creations, where we sew the scraps of your life into beautiful creations. I want to thank you for coming here today, and I want to thank all of those new subscribers because I've really grown this week. In fact, the other day I woke up to 91 subscribers, and when I woke up this morning it was 128. So that's our best day ever, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you to all of you who share my videos to help get the word out. And thank you to everyone for viewing, commenting, liking. I love it all, so thank you. Today we are going to make an iPad case. Now this fits my iPad, which is an iPad 6th generation, and it measures approximately 7 by 9.5. Now there are just so many varieties of tablets, whether they're Android or Apple products. There are Kindles, Kindle readers. There's no way I could make a measurement for every single one of you. So I can show you basically how I did this, and then you can take your measurements from there and go to make your own. I would say to take your measurements side to side and add at least 1.5 inches. Probably 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches to the sides, because you've got to allow for your seam allowances. But this is my own pattern. I didn't have anything to go by, and generally that's what I do, is I go to make something and I always try to do it without a pattern and just kind of wing it and see what happens. So making tutorials is new to me. I've only been at it for 1.5 months. So instead of just doing it in my own head and trying to figure it out, now I'm trying to explain to others how to do it. So I'm going to list all the dimensions of the fabric cuts, the VELCRO, the Pellon, everything like that you'll need in the description box. And I also wanted to point out that I did use Pellon on this. I could have used cotton batting. I could have used felt. I could have used most anything. Any of you who've been with me from the beginning, you know I am a scrapper, and I believe in using what we have available to us. I don't think you need to go out and purchase everything brand new. I'm a big believer in using what you have. That's what this channel's all about. In fact, when I said that 2022 was going to be the year of the scraps, what I meant by that was I have scraps from years of sewing. I've made so many quilts over the years, baby blankets, you name it, I've made it. And I've saved every scrap I've ever had. And yes, some of those scraps have turned into other quilts, but a lot of them are still in bags or boxes, and I need to use them. So I thought, I'm going to challenge myself in 2022 to use as many of those scraps as I can in as many different projects as I can. And that's where this channel came in, because I want to share my love of scraps and take you on my journey to see how many items we can make with our scraps and how many we can use. So I hope that you're having fun along the way. All right, so to show you just a quick version of this, I used crumbs that I cut into my measurements. The other side of this is here. It's got a pocket for your charging cable and cord, and this is where your tablet goes. And it closes with the VELCRO. And I did think about possibly putting a handle on it, but since I don't take my tablet anywhere, I basically just keep it at home. I didn't put a handle on, but you certainly could. I didn't include directions for that, unfortunately, since that wasn't something I was doing today. So I'll meet you over at the sewing table and we'll get started with this tutorial. And I hope you have fun today, and thank you for joining me. I love hanging out with all my sewing friends, and I hope that you feel like you're hanging out with friends as well. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention is our Facebook page. I finally got that done this week. Yay me. So I made a Facebook group, and it's called Marie's Scrappy Creations. And you do have to answer a question or two to get in, and that's just to keep out the spammers. So if you go to Facebook. If you're on Facebook, just type in Marie's Scrappy Creations, and you'll see there's just like 3 questions. There's nothing hard. In fact, if you just answer one of them, I'm going to let you in anyway. And if I know you, you're definitely getting in. So I hope that you join, because over there we're going to be able to share with each other what we're sewing. And I can't wait to see what some of you have made. I hope that some of you have made some of my tutorials. So I'm looking forward to seeing those over on the Facebook page. Okay, enough talking. We're going to get over and we're going to start cutting. See you over there. Okay, our first 2 pieces measure 11.5 by 9. And these are my outer pieces for my iPad cover. I guess this is a case. It's kind of like you slip it in there. Well, you saw it. You know what it is. So we're going to have 2 pieces, 11.5 by 9. Then we're going to need this to be cushioned. So I'm using Pellon 973. It's a fusible interfacing. I'm going to attach that with my iron, following the manufacturer's directions. Whoops, I would have had that upside down. That wouldn't have been good for the iron now, would it? I'm going to attach those. I also am going to do a few lines of either free motion quilting or just a few lines randomly going over it to hold them in place. I don't think I'm going to be washing this very often, but just in case, because you never know when something like that might get dirty. The one thing I do know about fusible fleece, it has been my experience that if it's washed often, the fusible does not always stay stuck to the fabric in all the places. The majority of it does. So if I were you, I would at least quilt it down a little bit. If you don't have the Pellon 973, you could use a lighter weight. You could use cotton batting. You could use whatever you have, a piece of felt. You could use so many different things. You just need some cushioning there to protect your case. The next thing on our list is our lining. And our lining measures exactly what our outer does, 11.5 by 9 inches. So you need 2 pieces. You're going to lay these right sides facing. Now, I did think when I was making this pattern or this tutorial, I'm not really sure what to call it, because I did have to measure everything out for myself and figure this out. I did think about possibly using a piece of cotton, whoops, or something as a layer here, and you certainly could if you would like to. I don't take my tablet very far. I just want to have it, you know, around the house. So I'm not all that worried about dropping it. If you're doing this more for protection, you might want to use some cotton batting quilted to these, but for myself, I'm just putting right sides together, and I'm going to sew the sides and the bottom. So you're going to sew like a U, and you're going to leave that top open. Okay. The next part is your pocket. So your pocket, I'm going to bring one of these pieces out. Your pocket piece measures 13 by 11.5. And I know that looks pretty big, but we're going to fold this in half, and it's going to go on similar to what this is, okay? So what you need to do with your pocket piece is you're going to have a piece of Pellon or cotton batting, because this is going to be folded in half. You're going to crease it with your iron. You're going to know where halfway is, okay? I'm using a piece of Pellon 987. I could use the same one I used on the lining. It really doesn't matter. I could use cotton batting. But I am going to attach that per manufacturer's instructions, as usual, I'm going to put that on there, because the reason we really want it on the pocket isn't so much for protection, which it will help, but we're going to be placing Velcro on there, and the interfacing or the fleece will help hold that, because it's difficult to stitch your the Velcro directly to your cotton. It's not very stable. So what I will be doing, once that's fused, I'll be sewing through it on one layer, but I'll show you that in a few minutes. So for now, I just want you to use cotton batting or Pellon. Get a piece of something on half of this. So my piece right here, oh, I didn't measure that. Let's see. That measures 6 1/4 by 11 1/4. So 6 1/4 by 11 1/4, because I always cut them just a little bit shy of the true measurement, so that it's not bulking up the seams so much. The next piece are your flaps. Your flaps measure 10 1/2 inches by 6 1/4 inches. And I have a piece of the thinner Pellon, the 987. You could certainly use cotton batting. I'm going to fuse that to one side. You couldn't tell I have a cat, could you? All right, I'm going to fuse this to one side of the flap, because we're going to put the Velcro, the other piece of Velcro is going to go on here. All right. So off camera, this is what we're going to do. We're going to fuse, if you're using Pellon, we're going to fuse it to our flap. We're going to fuse it to half of our pocket piece. And we're going to fuse it to both outer pieces on the wrong side. And while we're at it, we will sew around the sides and the bottom of our lining. All right, I'll meet you back here and we'll go on to the next step. I'm back with all of our pieces and my snazzy gloves. And if you're wondering why I'm wearing gloves, it's because I have very, very dry skin, and especially on the tips of my fingers. I have great big cracks and crevices, and I cannot touch fleece, cotton, batting, any of that without it sticking. And while I was working on this, it caught on my finger and pulled some of the dry skin and actually cut me. So I have to wear gloves a lot while sewing, and I figured I can tell you guys because you're going to be seeing it. All right, so let's get on with this. As you can see, I just took a serpentine stitch. It just kind of swiveled around. I went like this, kind of around. It went right off. It's not important as long as it is stitched down. Now, if you were using cotton batting, I would do the same thing. And as I said, a lot of people don't actually quilt on the fusible fleece, but because I have washed a bag a few times and part of it is lifting from the fusible part, I'm going to quilt it down a little bit, but you take care, you do whatever you feel is best to do. So the outer pocket, and this measurement was, I know I have it here, 13 inches by 11 1/2. Okay, so I folded in half to get that crease, and I ironed it, made a nice line, and then I put my thinner fusible fleece in here. And I guess I kind of wish I had used cotton batting. I think it would have made it a little softer than this, but either way. So you can use what you have. That's what my channel is all about, scrappiness and using what we have on hand. So if you have some felt, you could use that. If you have some fleece left over from a blanket or something, you can use anything you want in here. Anything that's just going to give it a little bit of stability. Because what we're doing next is we're going to get out a fabric marker. If you weren't here on Wednesday, I talked about water erasable and air erasable marking utensils. I also showed, as I should have had it out, I also showed my Hera marker. Let's see how that works on gray. So from the fold, okay, so we've got this folded in half. This is going to be the front, showing right on the front, our pocket. So we want to mark down 1/4 of an inch from the top. I'm going to try this Hera marker. Different fabrics, it works different ways. I don't know if you can see that, but I can. I can't make the camera. Oh, yep, there it is. Do you see that? Okay. So I'm going to mark the center of my pocket with a pin. And I've got Velcro. Now, the next thing is, which piece of Velcro do you think you should put down? And that can go either way, but personally, I take the softer one to lay it here. I'm going to fold it in half, give it a little bit of a crease, and lay it right against my pin. So I'm going to match that along that 1/4 inch from the edge. Pin it in place. Oops, I'm making a mistake. I gotta back up. I almost made a big boo-boo. We have to unfold this. We have to go a 1/4 inch down from the fold on the side that has the interfacing or cotton on there. I'm going to use my marker so that you guys can see it better. You may or may not be able to see it because this is, of course, almost out of ink juice. What are we going to call it? Out of ink. Okay, so it's on this side, on this end, I should say. And again, I'm going to fold it in half to mark the center. I'm trying to concentrate through this. I'll tell you what, I've had an awful few days of it. The other morning, I have an arthritic knee. Well, I have more than an arthritic knee, but I have an arthritic knee, and if I stay in one position too long, you know, nighttime, daytime, or whatever, it kind of seizes up. So the other night I was sleeping, and well, morning, I woke up around 2 a.m. and I went to turn over, and when I went to turn over, my knee wouldn't straighten. Like, it was horrifically painful. So my husband had to help me, but in the meantime, while he was getting over to me, I tried to swing my leg over the side of the bed, and when I did, I felt something in my back just kind of pull, and I thought, oh no. Well, that day, it really didn't bother me all that much. The next day was a whole other story, and I'm telling you what, this has not been fun. Anyway, so I'm dealing with that and trying to lean over this table and remember everything I'm supposed to tell you. Okay, in case I haven't said it, it's 8 inches of Velcro is what we're using. And again, we're placing it 1/4 of an inch from the fold on the side with whatever you're using, whether it's fusible fleece, interfacing, cotton, whatever you're using. And as long as it's within 1/8 of an inch of matching up to center, you're going to be good. Okay. So I'm going to hold this in place with my pins. This is definitely a place where you want everything kind of straight, because the whole thing is going to come down to, you have to make sure that that flap, when it folds down, is going to go in the right place. So this is what it looks like, and if I folded it where it was, this is going to be what it looks like. So if my measurements are right, it's about 1 3/4 inches, yeah, from the edge. Yep, I got it a little bit more one way than the other, but it's going to be close enough for me. That's what I say. Okay, now we are going to take our flaps. Okay, now our flaps measure 10.5 by 6 1/4. One has a piece of fleece interfacing or cotton on it, one does not. And you guessed it, the one that has it is the one that gets the other piece of Velcro. On this one, we're going to measure down 1/2 inch. And I am going to write all this in the description box because it's a lot to remember. 1/2 inch down. I'm going to go over that a few times so I can see it. These erase with just a wet washcloth. You just kind of dab it on there and all the marks come up. Not like a friction where you have to worry about it coming back. And if you missed it, I did talk about that on What's Up Wednesday. Okay, let's see what the center is on this. We'll fold it in half and make a little mark on the fabric. I'll fold this, and this is the other side. I don't know what they call different sides of Velcro. I've always thought of them as a male and female, and I know that's odd. I don't even know where I got that from, but that's how I think of it. But either way, I know they use that analogy on quite a few different things, but I don't think Velcro it's supposed to be. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to sew our Velcro down. Remember, when you sew, do not sew through the back. I mean, it's not going to be a do or die situation. It's just neater if on the pocket you sew through that one side and not the other side of the pocket. So you're going to sew one flap and one edge of your pocket. I'm going to use probably a 2.0 stitch length there again, and to stitch this down with some white thread. So now we're going to take our flap piece, the other side of our flap piece without the Velcro, flip it to the wrong side, take our bowl, go right up to the edge, make a little mark. You see how that is? Just right to the corner. You can't have it come out too far or it's going to run into our Velcro, and we wouldn't want that to happen. Okay, now I'm going to put the curved side on the same end as my Velcro. Right side's facing, and I'm going to pin in place. So we're going to sew 3 sides of this. Show you here in just a moment. So we're going to sew 1/4 inch down. We're going to hit that line, come back around 1/4 inch across, hit the circle, come back up. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to use, I'm going to use a 2.0 stitch length. And so I'm going to sew this, and I'm going to top stitch, or not top stitch, but I'm going to edge stitch this piece, and I'll meet you back. And we're back. Okay, I can take my pins out of this. Those stitches, I just used a 3.0. It held it in place while I'm doing the rest. Okay. And here I stitched around. I'm going to take my pinking shears to trim the corners. You could also trim with your scissors and just snip into your corners a little bit like this. You can do it either way. Flip this right side out. Make sure it's all out. I'm going to go over to the iron. Be careful not to iron the Velcro side, and still, even on the other side, don't give it a lot of heat. And you don't have to. I guess you could top stitch without it, but I'm going to try to make it lay down as flat as possible. I guess it could be done without ironing. I would have to hold it with a pin so that I could be sure it's going to stay where I want it to, because this Velcro is very close to the edge. The first one of these I tried, because I tried this yesterday with some scrap fabric, because this is my own pattern. I'm winging this as I went there yesterday, so you know, it isn't bound to be perfect. There's no way, because I am not a perfectionist. But most things I throw together kind of work. All right, so we're going to take this other piece, the one that doesn't have the pocket on it. We're going to top stitch this, come back, and we're going to add this here. So let's go top stitch this with a coordinating thread, contrasting thread, whichever you'd like to use. I used a 1/8 inch seam allowance going around that edge. It almost bit into, I guess it kind of did go into the corner of the Velcro, but just barely, and I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so with your other outer piece, right side facing, we can center it by folding in half, marking our center, folding the flap in half, marking our center. We'll line these up. That does not look even to me. I'm gonna eyeball it. I think I'm closer. Okay, with your edges completely even up here, even along here, take it to your machine, and 1/8 of an inch from the edge, you're going to do the same thing that you did here. We're holding it in place so that it will stay together when we place it together next. So this is what you should have. Okay, now, so what we're looking at is this is going to be, when we get it together, it's going to be like this, and this will come down like so. Okay, so we're going to put right sides together, and we're going to pin starting at the top. I always go and match my corners first, all 4 corners. And this is some thick fabric, and depending on your machine, it may or may not be friendly with this. If you have an older machine or one that doesn't like thick fabric, just go slow. It's fine. the other thing I would suggest, and I always try to do, is before you start a new project, put in a new needle, because it really does make a lot of difference. Okay, now I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance just like I did for the lining, because we need these to match up. So you need to use the same seam allowance that you used on your lining. So let's sew that, and I'll meet you back here. So we're all done stitching around 3 sides. We left our top open, and it should look like, it's tough to turn because it's pretty thick. We're going to turn it right side out, and I am not going to cut my corners in here. I'm not going to trim those corners, and there's a reason for that. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Our lining is still inside out. Our case is right side out. We're going to place our case inside our lining. We're going to match up our corners once we get it in there. We're going to match up our seams and pin. And this is why I was saying it's very important to make sure that you back tack at the beginning and the end of your seams, because if you didn't, these parts, they can come apart. The seam can come apart a little bit, and that just would not be good right now. So the thickness of this project makes it a little harder to get everything in there. I found this out on my trial one, but see, that looked like it didn't fit, but it does. It just looks a little wonky, so don't worry. I find that if I did it in the middle and then I go back and put a pin in between, that worked out much better for me. And of course, just because it works for me doesn't mean it works for you, but that's my hint and tip of the day. Okay, let's see. Get this one. Oh, you know what I did? I put that on the wrong seam. I had a seam of my scrap. That wouldn't be cool, would it? Better straighten this out. Make sure it's right over here. Aha. That could have been a disaster, and I would have had to refilm that. I would not have been a happy camper. But look at that. I fixed it right in the nick of time, didn't I? You knew I would, right? You didn't think I'd leave you hanging? Okay, couple more pins. Now, we are going to mark this. Somewhere along this top, we're going to leave an opening, and I'm going to use pink birdie pins to mark mine. Now, you could mark them with a pen mark. You could put your pins going the opposite way. There's a lot of different ways that you could mark this. Let's see how big that opening. That's 4. That's kind of bulky. I'm going to go a little bit more, about 4.5 inches for an opening. So we're going to start sewing, and we're going to back tack. We're going to sew all the way around this opening and back to here. We're going to leave this open, and you want to back tack really well because this is thick, and we're going to have to turn it out through that hole. Okay, so back tack a couple of times here, stitch around, and back tack a few times here. And I would use a fairly tight stitch, like a 2.0. That's what I'm going to be using. And I'm going to be using about a 1/4 to 3/8 inch seam allowance. And here we are. This is our opening. I sewed all the way around. Now, before we do everything else that we're going to do. If you were with me a few tutorials ago, we did some bags where we matched the corners up of the lining and the outer part of the bags so that the lining always stays inside the bag, and we're going to do this similar thing. So you're going to take the edge like this. You're going to match it up just like this. So we're just basically folding the bag over in half. And all I'm going to do is right here, I'm going to be outside my sewing area, right on this corner. I'm just going to stitch back and forth a few times to hold that in place. I'm going to do that on these two corners right here, and then I'll show you what to do next. All right, so I've stitched that, and it looks kind of funny, but that's all right. So now we're going to find our opening, and we're going to work the bag through that opening. And yesterday I did this and I thought, oh no, my pocket's on the wrong side, because when I flipped it out, it didn't look like it was going where it was supposed to. Let me show you. I'll do it that way just so you'll see. So in case you do it, you'll know what I'm talking about. It looked kind of like this. And I was like, oh no, I messed up. But all I had to do was flip the pocket the other way. So anyway, we're going to take the time to poke our corners out. That's the most important part right here, is to get those corners poked out. And it just takes some finagling. You can do it. Just a little bit of time. A little bit of effort. I have a little wooden thing that I normally use, but I don't have it handy here. So I'm going to poke it out with this. I can work it more when I'm not on camera. But our bag is almost done. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it to the iron. And I'm going to tuck this down where it's supposed to be so that this is even. Okay? Your lining should be down like this. So when you get here, you're going to have to fold it down whatever your seam allowance was. Okay, so we're going to press it, and then we're going to top stitch to close that, but we're going to top stitch all the way around. Just be careful. Keep your flap open like this when you come to stitch around here. But just carefully take your iron, or if you don't want to iron, I guess you could probably push that down. I'm just more comfortable with an iron. I think it leaves a neater result, but I've always been one for ironing, so some people aren't. Okay, so we're going to do that. I'll press this all down, and I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch around. I just wanted to take a second to show you that I pressed it and I pinned the opening closed so that it's easier for me to top stitch around. So the top stitching is done all around the bag. Turned out nice. And I have my iPad right here. Now this is in a case already. I have a protective cover. Now let's see how this works. I guess I could have slid it in there straight. And then we have our pocket for our cord. And we're done with our Scrappy iPad case. And as I said at the beginning, you can definitely change this around to whatever size your tablet is. I measured mine and I added an inch and a half, 2 inches to the side and 1.5 inches to the bottom. And you know, for these, I just kind of measured where I wanted them to be, how far up I wanted the pocket. And I think it turned out nice. I did think about putting a handle on it, but since I'm mostly home, I just wanted it more or less to keep it safe, because I have been known to drop my devices, my phones, and I don't drop this as often as my phone, but I still drop it. But it was a good use of scraps, and I actually was able to use scraps from my Pellon products, because I have a whole bag of those too. I want to thank you for staying around and sewing with me, and it means a lot that you guys are watching and commenting, hanging out with me. I really appreciate that, and I really enjoy it. I hope you enjoy the tutorials that I'm giving out and presenting you with. I'm not sure what next Sunday's tutorial is going to be, but maybe by What's Up Wednesday, I might have an idea to tell you about. And today's creative word of the day, because there is a cowboy boot right there, whoops, a cowboy boot right there, we're going to go with the word boot. So you use that word down below in the comment, and your name goes in the drawing for our monthly prize. So until What's Up Wednesday, take care, be safe, be kind, keep sewing. If you haven't joined my Facebook group yet, look out for Marie's Scrappy Creations. Be sure to join. We can share pictures of what we make. I thought that would be a great way to all get to know each other a little bit better. Take care. Bye-bye.